She pleaded, "Hurry up." The rancher moved forward and took an unthinkable action. The ranch sat far away from busy roads and loud towns, surrounded by wide fields and slow-moving hills. Every morning began the same way for the rancher. He woke before sunrise, stepped outside, and let the cold air clear his thoughts. The land was honest. It asked for effort and gave back just enough to survive. That was all he wanted. He had chosen this life on purpose. Years ago, he had learned that silence could be safer than people. Out here, nothing pretended to be more than it was. Animals needed care, fences needed repair, and the weather decided everything else. He followed routine because routine kept his mind calm. Each task had a time. Each day had a pattern. He believed that if he stayed within those lines, nothing unexpected could reach him. People in the nearby town respected him. They didn't know him well, but they knew he paid on time, kept his word, and stayed out of trouble. He didn't talk much when he came into town for supplies. A nod, a short answer, then back to the truck. Rumors never followed him because there was nothing to talk about. He was just the rancher who kept to himself. That was how he liked it. Late one afternoon, as the sun leaned low and painted the fields in soft orange light, something broke his routine. He noticed dust rising near the old dirt road that led to his property. Visitors were rare. He stood still, watching, until a worn-out car came into view. It moved slowly, as if unsure it was going the right way. The rancher felt a small tightening in his chest. He didn't like surprises. The car stopped near the gate. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. She looked around carefully, as if the land itself might be watching her. She was younger than he expected, her clothes plain but clean, her movements quick and alert. She hesitated before walking toward the fence. When she spoke, her voice was polite but rushed. She asked if this was his land. He nodded. She explained that her car was struggling and that she needed a place to rest for a while. She said she was looking for work, any kind of work, and would not be a problem. Her words came out smoothly, but her hands told another story. They shook slightly as she held them together. The rancher studied her without staring. He had learned to read small details over time. The dirt on her shoes showed she had been walking more than driving. There was a faint mark near her wrist that looked like it had healed too quickly. When he asked where she came from, her answer was short and unclear. Still, he didn't sense danger from her. What he felt was urgency. He told her she could come inside the fence and sit for a moment. He offered water. She accepted quickly, drinking as if she hadn't had any all day. She thanked him more than once, her eyes scanning the open land again and again. He didn't ask many questions. He believed that if people wanted to speak, they would. After a while, she asked if he ever needed help around the ranch. Her tone was careful, like someone stepping onto thin ice. He thought about it. He could manage on his own, but an extra set of hands wouldn't hurt. More importantly, sending her away didn't sit right with him. The road she came from felt heavy with something unseen. He told her she could stay for a few days. There was an old room near the barn that had been empty for years. It wasn't much, but it was clean and dry. When he said yes, relief crossed her face so clearly that it surprised him. She thanked him again, this time with tears held tightly back. That night, the ranch felt different. The wind moved the same way through the grass, and the animals settled as usual, but the rancher couldn't ignore the sense that his quiet world had shifted. He ate dinner alone, listening to the sounds of the land, wondering why he had agreed so quickly. He told himself it was just kindness, nothing more. Over the next few days, the woman worked hard. She didn't complain, even when tasks were tiring or unfamiliar. She followed instructions carefully and finished everything she started. The rancher noticed that she woke early, sometimes earlier than him. Often he would find her standing outside, looking toward the road before the sun was fully up. She rarely spoke about herself. When he asked simple questions, she gave simple answers. Her past was described in general terms, never details. She laughed politely when he made dry comments, but the laughter never lasted long. It faded too quickly, like a light switched off. What stood out most was her constant sense of time. She asked how long tasks would take. She asked when deliveries usually came. She asked how often anyone passed by the ranch. Each question sounded casual on the surface, but together they formed a pattern that unsettled him. Sometimes while working, she would suddenly say, "Can we hurry up?" Her voice wasn't demanding, just tight with worry. If he asked why, she would shake her head and apologize, saying she was just nervous. At night, the rancher noticed lights on in her room long after everything else had gone dark. Once, he heard footsteps moving quietly, stopping, then starting again. He considered asking if she was all right but decided against it. He had always believed in giving people space. Still, his routine was no longer enough to keep his thoughts steady. He found himself listening more closely to distant sounds. The hum of an engine far away made him pause. A shadow moving across the field caught his attention longer than it should have. He didn't like that he was changing, that his calm had cracks in it now. One evening, while they were repairing a fence together, he noticed her hands trembling again. She dropped a tool, quickly picking it up and apologizing. When he told her there was no rush, she looked at him with eyes full of something close to fear. "I just don't want to waste time," she said softly. That was all. The rancher nodded, but the words stayed with him. Time had never felt dangerous to him before. Now it seemed like something she was running from. Despite everything, there were moments of normalcy. They shared simple meals. They spoke about weather, animals, and the land. She smiled more on those days, almost forgetting whatever weighed on her. In those moments, the ranch felt like a place of shelter, just as it had been for him. But shelter can only hold so much. By the end of the week, he knew her presence was not temporary in the way he had first believed. Something had followed her here, even if it hadn't arrived yet. The land, usually open and peaceful, felt like it was holding its breath. The rancher stood one night at the edge of his property, looking down the road she had come from. The sky was wide and quiet, stars scattered like distant promises. He reminded himself that he had lived through many seasons alone. He had faced storms, loss, and hardship without help. Still, as he turned back toward the barn lights glowing faintly in the distance, he understood something had already changed. Offering a place to stay had been a simple act. What came with it was not. And though he did not yet know how, the calm life he had built was slowly, quietly moving toward a moment that would test everything he believed about right, wrong, and the cost of acting, or waiting too long. The next days did not bring peace. Instead, they brought a quiet pressure that slowly filled every corner of the ranch. Nothing bad happened, yet everything felt close to happening. The rancher noticed it in small ways first. The woman's eyes followed every sound. A bird lifting from the grass made her turn quickly. A distant engine caused her shoulders to stiffen. She tried to hide it, but fear has its own language. Each morning, she asked what the plan was for the day before he even finished his coffee. When he listed the tasks, she listened closely, then asked how long each one might take. If he said there was no rush, she would nod, but her fingers would twist together as if time itself were chasing her. "Hurry up," she said one morning while they moved supplies into the barn. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried weight. He paused and looked at her. "There's no one waiting on us," he said calmly. She swallowed and forced a small smile. "I know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." But she said it again later, and again the next day. The rancher began to wonder what kind of life taught someone that stillness was dangerous. He had learned the opposite. To him, slow days were safe days. Fast moments usually meant trouble. He tried to keep things normal. He spoke steadily, moved at his usual pace, and kept his routine firm. He believed that calm could be shared, that if he stayed steady, she might follow. Sometimes it worked. On those days, she laughed more easily and even sang quietly while working, but calm never lasted. One afternoon, he noticed a bruise on her arm when her sleeve pulled back. It was faint, already turning yellow, but it had not been there before. He didn't ask how it happened. He only said she could take the rest of the day off if she wanted. She shook her head quickly. No. Please, let's keep going. Her need to stay busy worried him more than any injury would have. That evening, as the sun dropped and the sky grew heavy with dark clouds, she stood near the fence longer than usual. She kept watching the road, her eyes narrowing with each passing minute. When a truck passed far away, barely visible, she stepped back as if it were closer than it was. The rancher joined her quietly. "No one comes out here unless they mean to," he said. "That's what scares me," she replied before she could stop herself. She realized what she had said and turned away, embarrassed. He didn't press her. He only nodded as if he understood more than she had meant to share. Later that night, he heard a knock on his door. It was gentle, unsure. When he opened it, she stood there holding a small bag. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. "I think I should leave," she said quickly. "I don't want to bring trouble to you." He studied her face. Whatever she was running from felt closer now. He could see it in the way she leaned forward, ready to move at any sound. "You're safe here," he said. "No one knows you're here." She looked down. "That's what I thought before." He didn't know what to say to that. After a moment, she sighed and lowered the bag. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired." He told her she could stay. That leaving in the dark would only make things worse. She thanked him and returned to her room, but sleep did not come easily for either of them that night. From then on, the tension became harder to ignore. She jumped when the phone rang, even when it was only the rancher checking a supply order. She asked him to keep the gates closed at all times. She asked if the ranch had any hidden paths, any places that couldn't be seen from the road. These were not normal questions. The rancher felt caught between wanting to protect his peace and wanting to protect her. He had no proof that danger was real, yet everything about her said it was. He began checking locks more often. He started parking his truck in different places each night, unsure why he did it, only knowing it felt right. One afternoon, while fixing a broken water line, she suddenly froze. Her face drained of color as she stared toward the hills. "What is it?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "Nothing, I thought I saw something." They stood there for a long moment listening. The wind moved through the grass. Birds called to each other, nothing else. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm making you uncomfortable." He surprised himself by answering honestly. "I'm more worried than uncomfortable." She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if deciding whether she could trust him with the truth. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Whatever she wanted to say stayed trapped behind fear. "I didn't plan for this," she said finally. "I just needed time." Time. Again that word. That evening, rain came hard and fast. The sound on the roof was loud enough to drown out distant noises. For the first time in days, she seemed calmer. They ate together, listening to the storm, talking about small things. She told him she used to like rain, that it made the world feel smaller. Later, as the storm slowed, she stood and went to the window. The calm left her face immediately. "Can we hurry?" she asked suddenly. "Hurry where?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know, just hurry." Before he could respond, headlights flashed in the distance, far down the road. They appeared for only a moment, then vanished behind a bend. But the effect on her was immediate. Her breathing became shallow. She backed away from the window, pressing herself against the wall. "That's them," she whispered. His heart beat faster. "Who?" She covered her face with her hands. "I shouldn't have come here." He stepped closer but kept his voice calm. "You're not alone. Talk to me." She lowered her hands slowly. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady, as if she had practiced holding it together. "I left something behind, something important to someone who doesn't like losing control." He waited. "They think I owe them," she continued. "I don't, but they don't care about that." He didn't ask for names. He didn't ask for details that would make things worse. He understood enough. Whatever she had escaped was not willing to let go. The lights did not return that night. The rain washed the road clean, leaving no tracks. Still, sleep stayed away. The rancher sat awake, listening, thinking about choices he never planned to make. By morning, the woman looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her eyes. She moved quickly, packing and unpacking the same small bag, unsure what to do. "They'll come back," she said. "They always do." He felt anger rise in him, slow and unfamiliar. Not loud anger, but the kind that tightens the chest and sharpens the mind. He had spent his life avoiding conflict, believing distance was the best protection. Now distance was no longer an option. He told her they would make a plan, simple, careful, nothing rushed. She nodded, but her hands shook. "Please," she said again, "we don't have much time." The rancher looked out over his land. It had always been his refuge. Now it was becoming a shield for someone else. He did not yet know what that would cost him. As the day moved forward, the air felt heavier, as if the land itself sensed what was coming. Every sound seemed louder. Every shadow felt longer. And deep inside, the rancher understood that waiting might be just as dangerous as acting. The morning began quietly, but the quiet felt false, like a pause before something breaks. The rancher woke before sunrise, not because of habit this time, but because his mind refused to rest. He sat on the edge of his bed, listening. The land was still. No engines, no voices. Yet his body stayed tense, ready. Outside, the sky was pale and wide. He walked the fence line slowly, checking every corner, every gate. He told himself he was only being careful, but deep down, he knew he was preparing for something he could not yet name. When he returned, the woman was already awake. She stood near the barn, holding her jacket close even though the air was not cold. Her eyes met his the moment he appeared, as if she had been waiting for proof that he was still there. "They didn't come last night," she said. "Does that mean they won't?" he asked. She shook her head. "It means they're thinking." That answer stayed with him. They worked together that morning, but their movements were quick and sharp, not calm like before. Every task felt urgent, even the simple ones. When a tool slipped from his hand, she flinched hard enough that he stopped what he was doing. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean." "It's all right," he said. "You don't need to apologize." But she kept doing it, saying sorry for things that were not her fault, acting as if the world punished mistakes without warning. Late in the morning, a sound reached them both at the same time. It was faint, far away, but clear enough to recognize. An engine, moving slowly, too slowly. The woman's face drained of color. She grabbed his arm before she realized what she was doing. "Hurry up," she whispered. "Please." He listened. The sound faded, then returned, closer now. It stopped, then started again. "They're looking," she said. "They don't know exactly where I am yet." The rancher felt his chest tighten. This was no longer fear without shape. This was real, present. He looked toward the road, then back at her. "Go inside," he said. "Stay out of sight." She didn't move. "Don't leave me." "I won't," he said firmly. "But you need to trust me." She hesitated, then nodded and moved quickly toward the barn room. He watched until the door closed, then turned back to the land. The engine sound returned, louder now. A vehicle appeared at the far end of the road, just beyond the fence line. It slowed as it passed, then slowed more. It did not stop, but it did not leave either. It disappeared behind a rise, only to return minutes later. The rancher felt anger rise again, stronger this time. This was his land, his quiet, his rules. Someone was circling it like a threat, and he did not accept that easily. He went inside and picked up his phone. He considered calling for help, but stopped. What would he say? That someone might be looking for someone else. He had no proof, no names, no clear reason. He knew how that would sound. Instead, he made a decision he had never imagined making. He went to the storage shed and pulled out items he rarely used anymore. Things meant for emergencies he had hoped would never come. He checked them carefully, his movements steady despite the storm in his thoughts. Every action felt heavy, like stepping deeper into water. By the time he finished, the engine sound had stopped again. The woman stepped out slowly, as if afraid the air itself might betray her. "Are they gone? For now," he said. She looked at him, searching his face. "What are you doing?" "Protecting what's under my care," he answered. She shook her head. "This isn't your fight. It became my fight when they came here." Her eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted this." "I know," he said softly. They stood there, the space between them filled with unspoken fear. Then, without warning, the engine returned. This time it did not slow. It turned. The vehicle moved off the road and toward the fence. The woman gasped. "They found us." The rancher's mind moved faster than his body ever had before. He saw the weak points of the land, the places that could be crossed, the places that could not. He realized all at once that hiding was no longer enough. "Hurry," she said again, her voice breaking. "Please do something." He did. He moved forward, not toward the vehicle, but toward a choice he had avoided his entire life. He stepped into action instead of distance, control instead of silence. He closed gates. He blocked paths. He used the land the way only someone who had lived on it for years could. Every fence, every turn, every narrow stretch worked in his favor. The vehicle slowed, stopped, then backed away, confused by obstacles it had not expected. The rancher did not chase. He did not threaten. He simply made it clear that this place would not be easy to enter. The engine revved in frustration, then turned away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound faded into nothing. Only the wind remained. The woman sank to the ground, her strength finally gone. She covered her face and cried, not loudly but deeply, as if every breath released weeks of fear. The rancher stood still, his heart pounding. He felt changed. The line he had crossed was invisible, but it was real. He had acted in a way that could not be undone. "They'll come back," she said between breaths. "Maybe," he replied, "but not the same way." She looked up at him. "Why did you do that?" He thought about the answer, about the years of solitude, about believing that staying out of trouble was the same as doing right. "Because doing nothing would have been worse," he said. The day passed slowly after that. No more engines, no more movement, but peace did not return. The ranch felt watched even when it was empty. As evening came, the woman packed her bag again. "I can't stay," she said. "Not now," he nodded. "I know. But if I leave, they might follow." He looked at the road. "Then we'll make sure they don't know which way you went." They waited until night fell fully, until the stars were sharp and the land dark. He guided her through a path few people knew existed, one that led away from the main road and into open country. At the edge of the land, she stopped. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," he said, "by trusting me." She hesitated, then asked, "Are you going to be all right?" He thought about the question, about the choice he had made, about the consequences that might still come. "I will be," he said. "I always am." She nodded, then turned and disappeared into the dark. The rancher stood there long after she was gone. The land was quiet again, but it would never feel the same. He had learned something about himself that day, that when pressed, he could move forward instead of away. That sometimes the unthinkable is not an act of harm, but an act of standing firm when fear demands retreat. As he walked back toward the lights of the ranch, he knew this was not the end. It was only the moment everything changed. The days after she left were not quiet in the way the rancher had known before. The land was still wide and open, the sky unchanged, but something heavy stayed in the air. It was the weight of what had happened and the worry of what might follow. The first morning alone felt strange. He woke up and listened, expecting to hear her footsteps or the soft sound of the door opening. There was nothing. Only wind moving through grass and animals shifting in their pens. He went through his routine, but it no longer brought comfort. Each task reminded him that someone had been there, someone who had needed him. He replayed the moment again and again in his mind. The sound of the engine, her voice shaking as she said, "Hurry up." His own decision to act instead of step back. He had always believed that staying out of trouble was the best way to live. Now he wondered if trouble sometimes finds you no matter how far you try to stay from it. On the second day, a car arrived at the ranch. Not the kind that brought fear, but the kind that brought questions. Two officials stepped out, calm but serious. Someone in town had noticed unusual movement near his land and reported it. Nothing specific, just concern. The rancher greeted them politely. He answered their questions carefully, choosing honesty without giving more than was asked. He spoke of strangers passing on the road, of hearing an engine, of keeping his property secure. He did not mention the woman's name. He did not explain her fear. He felt it was not his story to fully tell. They listened, took notes, and looked around. One of them studied the fences and nodded slowly, as if understanding the choices that had been made. "You did what you thought was right," one of them said. The rancher did not respond. He wasn't sure yet if that was true. After they left, word spread. In a small town, it always does. People began stopping by more often. Some came out of concern. Others came out of curiosity. A few came with judgment hidden behind friendly smiles. He noticed the looks when he went into town for supplies. People spoke in quieter voices. Conversations stopped when he walked past. He had not broken any rules, but he had stepped outside the image people had of him. The quiet rancher, the man who stayed neutral. Now he was something else. At night, he lay awake listening for sounds that might never come. Every passing car made him sit up. Every shadow felt longer. He wondered if the people looking for the woman would return. He wondered if his actions had only delayed something worse. He also wondered about her, where she had gone, whether she was safe, whether she still watched the horizon with fear. Guilt and worry mixed together, making rest impossible. A week passed, then another. No one returned to the ranch. No strange engines. No signs of being watched. Slowly the land began to feel like itself again, but the rancher did not. One evening an older neighbor came by, a man who had known the rancher for years but never said much. They stood by the fence, watching the sun sink low. "I heard some talk," the neighbor said carefully. The rancher nodded. "There's always talk." The neighbor looked at him. "You didn't have to get involved." "I know," the rancher replied, "but you did." "Yes." They stood in silence for a while, then the neighbor spoke again. "Sometimes doing nothing is safer. Sometimes it's just easier." The rancher turned to him. "Easier doesn't always mean right." The neighbor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "No, it doesn't." That conversation stayed with him. For the first time, he felt less alone in his thoughts. As days turned into weeks, the attention faded. The town found new things to talk about. Life moved on as it always does. Yet inside the rancher, something had shifted permanently. He found himself thinking more about people, not just land and animals, about fear and trust, about how quickly a quiet life can become complicated when another person steps into it. One afternoon, he found something she had left behind, a small notebook tucked into a shelf near the barn. He hesitated before opening it. Inside were simple notes, lists of places, reminders to stay alert, a few lines about wanting a normal life someday. There were no details, no names, just a record of someone trying to stay one step ahead of fear. He closed the notebook and placed it back where he found it. Keeping it felt wrong. Destroying it felt worse. Some stories deserve to stay unfinished. That night he stood outside under the stars, thinking about how close he had come to losing everything he valued. His peace, his freedom, his sense of self, all because of one choice made in a moment of urgency. And yet, when he imagined turning back time and choosing differently, he couldn't see himself doing so. Letting fear decide for him would have changed him in a way he might never recover from. The rancher realized that consequences are not always loud or immediate. Sometimes they arrive quietly, settling into your thoughts, changing how you see the world. He had crossed a line, not one drawn by rules, but one drawn by belief. He no longer believed that staying distant was always the safest path. Sometimes distance protects only the person who stays comfortable, not the one who needs help. As the season shifted and the air grew cooler, he returned fully to his work. The animals needed care. The land needed attention. Life demanded forward motion, whether he was ready or not. Still, every so often he would look down the road and remember her voice. Hurry up, not as a command but as a plea, a reminder that for some people time is not gentle. He didn't know if he would ever hear from her again. He didn't know if his actions would bring consequences later. What he did know was this: when the moment came, he had chosen to act. And that choice, with all its weight and uncertainty, had become part of who he was. The ranch remained his home. The silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It carried meaning now. It carried the memory of fear faced and a line crossed, not out of anger or control, but out of responsibility. And as he closed the gate one evening and looked across the land he loved, he accepted that some changes cannot be undone. They can only be lived with, learned from, and carried forward into whatever comes next. Time moved forward, even though the memory of those days stayed close. The rancher learned that some moments do not fade. They settle quietly into a person, shaping thoughts, choices, and the way silence feels. Months passed. The seasons changed the land as they always had. Green fields turned dry, then came back to life again. The animals followed their natural rhythm. Work continued, steady and demanding. From the outside, everything looked the same. But inside the rancher, something had grown deeper. He was no longer just a man who worked the land and avoided trouble. He had become someone who understood how close ordinary life sits to difficult choices. At first, he expected consequences to arrive suddenly. A visit, a question, a problem he would have to face. Each time a car slowed near his road, his body tensed. Each unfamiliar sound made him pause, but nothing came. Slowly the fear softened, not gone but quieter. One morning, while repairing an old fence, he realized he was no longer listening for engines. He was listening to the land again. The wind, the animals, his own breathing. That realization surprised him. It felt like a door closing gently behind him. Still, he had questions that would never be answered. Did she find safety? Did the people searching for her finally stop? Did his actions truly help or only delay something else? He accepted that he might never know. One afternoon, a letter arrived. There was no return address. The handwriting was careful, almost hesitant. He stood for a long moment before opening it, his heart beating faster than it had in weeks. The letter was short. She wrote that she was safe now, that she had found a place where she could breathe without fear. She did not explain how or where. She only said that the night she left the ranch had changed everything for her. "You believed me when I couldn't explain," the letter said. "That mattered more than you know." He read the letter twice, then a third time. Relief washed over him, slow and steady. Not happiness exactly, but something close to peace. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not as a trophy or reminder of danger, but as proof that his choice had meaning beyond that moment. After that, the ranch felt lighter. He found himself speaking more when he went into town. Not much, but enough. He listened more closely to people's stories. He noticed fear in small signs the way he had learned to notice it in her. Tight voices, rushed movements, eyes that searched the room too often. He didn't go looking for trouble. He still believed in boundaries. But he no longer believed in turning away just because something was uncomfortable. One evening, a storm rolled in fast. The sky darkened early, clouds thick and heavy. As rain fell, he stood on the porch watching it soak into the ground. He thought about how storms look dangerous from a distance, but how necessary they are. Without storms, the land dries out. Cracks form. Nothing grows. That thought stayed with him. The rancher understood now that his quiet life had never truly been untouched. It had only been untested. When the test came, he had acted not perfectly, not without cost, but with intention. That mattered. Years later, people would still tell small versions of the story, not all of them accurate. Some would say he was brave. Others would say he was reckless. The rancher never corrected them. He knew the truth lived somewhere between those words. What he had done was not heroic. It was human. He had been asked to choose between comfort and responsibility, and he had chosen responsibility. Not because he wanted to be part of something larger, but because in that moment, standing still felt wrong. As he grew older, the land remained his constant. He trained younger hands to help with work, passing on knowledge the same way it had been passed to him. He taught them patience, awareness, and respect for quiet things. Sometimes when they asked why he was so careful about certain paths or gates, he would simply say, "Because details matter." And they did. On clear nights, he would sit outside and look at the stars. He no longer felt like they were distant or unreachable. They were simply there, steady, watching over a world full of choices and consequences. He thought about how one sentence, "Hurry up," had carried so much weight. It had not been about speed. It had been about fear, trust, and the need for someone to act before time ran out. That plea had changed him. The rancher never told the full story to anyone. He didn't need to. Some truths don't require explanation. They live in how a person moves through the world afterward. He lived with more awareness now, more patience, more courage than he knew he had before. And though his life returned to quiet days and steady work, it was no longer empty of meaning. It was filled with the understanding that even the most ordinary lives can be shaped by extraordinary moments. In the end, he did not see himself as someone who took an unthinkable action. He saw himself as someone who chose not to look away. That choice stayed with him, not as a burden but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes when someone pleads for time, for help, for action, the smallest step forward can change the direction of many lives, including your own.